Ready? How are you, everybody?
Ministers, Chief Secretary, and members of the media, and welcome to this post-cabinet briefing. Without much further ado, I'll hand you over to the Chief Secretary of the President and Cabinet, Dr. Slana.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair and Minister, members of the media, we welcome you to the first 32nd post-cabinet briefing. And as usual, presentation will be given by the chair of the Ministerial Briefing Team. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Secretary. And so once again, I always want to thank the members of the 40th State. They are always there for us. I also want to welcome my colleague ministers. I do have Honorable Professor Movira here, who is the Minister of Higher Education, but is also standing in as the Vice Chair for the Ad hoc Committee on the Task Force on COVID-19. Then I do have Honorable Kazembe Kazembe, our Minister of Home Affairs. Right behind me, there is Honorable Yovu, who is the Minister of Environment, Tourism, and Honorable Casey Coventry, Minister of Sports and Youth. They will be there to take your questions. Today, Cabinet received an update on the steps that are being taken to contain the COVID-19 pandemic from the Minister of Defense and World Veterans Affairs, Honorable Osise Mchunguri, as the Chairperson of the Ad hoc Interministerial Task Force on the COVID-19 outbreak. In terms of testing, the Ministry of Health and Childcare has, in line with WHO guidelines, adopted those people showing COVID-19 symptoms. And in view of the reopening of schools for examination classes, opening of the tourism and hospitality industry, aviation sectors, and the need to afford the working class time to attend gymnasia, Cabinet approved the extension of business operating hours, including those of gymnasia, from 6:30 a.m. to 1830 hours. Cabinet further approved the resumption of InterCity travel. This is to facilitate the smooth movement of examination candidates, citizens, and visitors. Transporters who wish to ferry passengers in this InterCity travel should register with the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development to ensure that they strictly comply with standard operating procedures for their sector, which are compliant to the WHO guidelines and all COVID-19 regulations. In support of this service, the Vehicle Inspection Department, VID, should also resume its services. All employees in the tourism sector should comply with the COVID-19 regulations, as is done in all the other approved services. I also want to say only international travelers are required to provide the 48-hour negative COVID-19 certificate. And in order to facilitate access to critical documentation from several registries during the COVID-19-induced lockdown, Cabinet approved that the central registry should reopen and offer services such as the issuance of births and death certificates, national registrations, as well as passports. Measures are being put in place to ensure that operations at central registry offices, which are usually characterized by overcrowding, are in line with the Ministry of Health and Childcare and WHO protocols. This is in order to curtail the transmission of COVID-19. Members of the public will be informed on the timeline for accessing the critical services. Cabinet further authorized the partial reopening of the Department of Immigration Client Service Center for the purposes of processing short-term investor work and student payments, also issuing out visas at ports of entry, and resume enforcement operations through the compliance section. The National Museums and Monuments of Zimbabwe will be opened to allow visitors access to national monuments that include the National Heroes Acre and National History Museum. Cabinet reiterates that despite the measures taken today to further open up the economy, the threat from COVID-19 is still real, and citizens should continue to rigorously adhere to the COVID-19 containment measures. The Cabinet received a review of the Communal Areas Management Program for Indigenous Resources, CAMP5. Cabinet considered and approved proposals to refocus and revitalize the Communal Areas Management Program for Indigenous Resources, CAMP5, and this was presented by the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development as the chair. Implementing the proposals will result in a more effective and transparent CAMP5 that will benefit communities and further operationalize the devolution concept. The CAMP5 initiative targets the conservation and sustainable utilization of wildlife and other natural resources as livelihood options for rural communities. Cabinet highlights that a widely consultative CAMP5 review process was conducted in 2016, and this revealed that the CAMP5 program was experiencing institutional, operational, legal, and external challenges. Furthermore, the CAMP5 model is highly dependent on hunting revenue, which generates 90% of the total revenue. There is need for diversification if the program is to remain viable. Cabinet noted that the CAMP5 program should diversify into other activities such as photographic safaris, ecotourism, bird viewing, flora and fauna, to widen the revenue base and explore alternative markets for trophy hunting. In order to guarantee the proper regulation and enforcement of stakeholder benefits and to resolve current misunderstandings between the rural district councils and producer communities, Cabinet concurred on the need to ensure that the CAMP5 program becomes more efficient and induces economic growth in line with Vision 2030. Cabinet thus approved the following: that a statutory instrument of CAMP5 regulations be enacted, clearly spelling out, among other things, the definition of appropriate authority status and roles, appropriate authority conferment procedures and revocation, then producer communities, revenue sharing mechanisms and ratios, and accountability and institutional arrangements for a renewed CAMP5 module. And that the Parks and Wildlife Act and the Environmental Management Act will be aligned to the Constitution, and that the provisions on the clear roles and responsibilities of ZimParks as regulator of the CAMP5 program be incorporated. Cabinet also directed that appropriate standard operational procedures for CAMP5 and community-based natural resources management be established. To attract improved funding flows to CAMP5, the existing laws will be strengthened to compel CAMP5 to establish credible systems, and in addition, the practitioner's manual for CAMP5 community-based natural resources management in Zimbabwe will be developed by the Parks and Wildlife Management Authority. The Cabinet received a report on the Zimbabwe's revised agroecological regions. Cabinet has adopted the revised Zimbabwe agroecological zones as presented by the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, Honorable Professor Mudira. The revised zones, developed using local capacity and being testimony of the success of Education 5.0, will revolutionize agricultural planning and practice in Zimbabwe to make it more precise, as it will no longer be based on the outdated agroecological zones which were developed between 1945 and 1960. In response to the urgent need of aligning agricultural practice with the changing climatic patterns, the government of Zimbabwe, through the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, initiated a revision of the country's agroecological zones. Based on the observed pattern of rainfall and temperature and their influence on agricultural practice, the revision of the agroecological zones has two main objectives. That is, one, to redefine the agroecological zones based on the current climate trends and recommend land use practices for each zone. And two, to develop an interactive software AgroZim mobile application that would assist users of the updated agroecological zones to get important, especially explicit information which is required to guide agricultural practice in Zimbabwe. Cabinet informed the public that the Zimbabwe agroecological zone map will be availed as a mobile application, thus bringing numerous benefits to farmers who will be able to access information related to the agroecological zones. The appropriate land use also for patterns, temperatures, and soil types of the areas, among other information. This mobile application will be free to download and will be available on Google Play Store. The use of these agroecological zones, natural regions, is very important as it allows crops or livestock to be produced within their appropriate climate regions. The Cabinet also received principles for the proposed Sport and Recreation Amendment Bill. Cabinet considered and approved principles on the proposed Sport and Recreation Amendment Bill as presented by the Minister of Youth, Sports, Arts and Recreation, Honorable Kesty Coventry. Cabinet noted that Zimbabwe currently has no legislation which regulates sport in general, and that the Sport and Recreation Commission Act does not define recreation, hence creating overlaps with other entities such as tourism, Zim parks, and the National Arts Council. The bill is therefore to redress this situation. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Now we come to when we will be inviting them to pose questions on the issue that we raised. Very diverse, very critical for the development of our country. Any questions that you people want to include here? My question is going to be the Honorable Chair. Since business trading hours has been built, can you make a comment on the cafe? Is the cafe still on, or is it automatically going to be off because the hours of trading is being built? Okay. Any on the offer? Yes, please.
My question goes to maybe I don't know which is the issue of transport. You mentioned that those who want to transport InterCity travel should register. Is it only InterCity or local? Yeah, that's one clarity. Is it only InterCity?
Yes, please.
My name is Silvester from Music and Happen South TV and Radio. My question is on the opening of the school. I noted that government has availed 600 million to the opening of schools. Is there a modality on how these schools are going to access this money to ensure that there is a smooth opening of schools? You also mentioned that VIG is opening services. What type of services is it opening? Is it opening all, including for learners, for people who want to get driver's license? Because we have noticed that in the past, people have become the increase of money by people who are offering fake driver's license because of desperation, because of the closure of the VIG. And also a follow-up on the question on the roadblock that has been, as we have relaxed lockdown measures and businesses almost gone back to normal. Are police not able, are they not competently able to manage those roadblocks without the help of soldiers? Do they have the requisite manpower to be able to do that by themselves without involving soldiers? Because we understand that the police have not recruited for a very long time, and they are severely undermined. Is that the correct position?
Okay, thank you. Last contributor. Yes, please.
This time I'm going to the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs. Since the report has been made that the Central Rate is going to be resuming operation, maybe the Minister of Home Affairs could give us a status in terms of production, as in it is practically a part of that production. Do they now have the requisite material so that they can be able to cover the coverage weakness for the
Thank you. That completes the session.
There are actually more than four, because message alone, I think you put three questions. But all the same, thank you very much. Thank you to Secretary. The first question is going to Professor Morgira as Vice Chair of the Task Force, and the second one also, this is from Kudai Matsiri, Professor, and he wants a comment since there is a relaxation of time for business. They're going to be, can you comment on the curfew, and maybe you can tackle the same one with Tapaga, who is also a freelance, who wants to know those who need to go. Now that we've opened the InterCity, Kelly partners need to register, we'll say that. If you would like to know whether that will apply also to the local, is it just InterCity? I think that was his question. Let's tackle those two and we'll go to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Thank you, guys. The question on business hours. The main issue that we're looking at is the issue of gyms and stuff, for sports stuff, so that they begin at 6:30 and close at 6:30 in the evening. 6:30 morning, 6:30 in the evening. Now, what is the implication of this on the curfew? The curfew is still in place. It has not been removed. Now, on the issue of intercity travel, the issue about transportation generally, all transporters are registered. But we are now talking about intercity travel because you know, according to our current regulations or previous regulations, intercity travel was not taking place in a formal way. So now we are saying every transporter who is interested in participating in the business of intercity transportation, they have to register with the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development. I think this gives an answer to this question, I think.
Thank you very much. Question is about, he wants to know whether schools will access this standard period. We were talking about opening of schools in the budget for primary and secondary education. Please answer that question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. 600 million allocated to the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education for the sole purpose of facilitating the opening of schools in various aspects that include PPE, meaning sanitizers and other things that make them be able to open while observing the WHO and Ministry of Health guidelines. Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, in summary, are schools. So when the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education has been allocated that money is really for schools. I don't know, Blessed, if I can just say, how do you define Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education? I define them as schools from ECD to A level. So money is for school, I think.
Thank you, Professor. I'm sure this is the yeah. But I thought last time we talked about what the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education is doing to make sure that the children and the students are safe in terms of containment of this disease. So I'm sure you understood exactly what you said. Then again, Blessed would like to, is excited about the VID opening up, and he said what type of service will they be providing to the public, licensing people and school class people taking people's money about licensing.
Thank you, Blessed, for that question. The context in which VID came is that when we are opening the InterCity transportation, or any public transportation for that matter, licensing is done by VID. Therefore, it would make sense to open the transportation system and not open VID. So it's basically for the convenience of the transport operator. When it comes to specific details on what exactly are different services that are within VID, I think this information will be provided by the Ministry of Transport when it's doing its operation. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor. Then I come to you, Honorable. The roadmap. He went on to say our police is really undermanned. Thank you, Honorable Kazembe. And again, the last but not least question is again directed to you, Honorable Minister, about the Central Registry, which is now going to be open. We wanted to know what is the status of the passport production. We want to know whether that they have something that been offered in
charge out outside the country. Those are the cases, the critical cases we are looking at. So those we don't expect them to be so many for now. And we have to have substantial amount of consumables, but we don't have enough consumables at this stage to be able to provide services to everybody. But having said that, we have also been working even under COVID to try and clear the backlog with the minimum resources that we can. And I'm glad to say today it was cleared more than 200,000. I think we're now going towards 300,000 in terms of clearing the backlog. So we have been using consumables, and I'm glad that our organization thanks Treasury for availing those resources. But it's been difficult because of the COVID pandemic, which meant that the need for resources was overwhelming.
Thank you very much, Minister Zimbabwean. I'm back to you, Secretary, for the second round.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Doing a follow-up. My question was not answered. I said, what mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that schools directly get that money? So in essence, Minister, there's a school in Gogo. How are you going to give it money? How is it going to access that money? That is my question. What mechanism has been put in place to ensure that happens? Because we have heard government talking about money, but the actual disbursement of the money is not there. Now, I ask this question because government almost always gets involved when schools increase fees to meet their needs and demands. And the government intervenes and says, no, this is not going to happen. Now, you would understand that parents did not pay school fees for the second term, but there are fixed costs that the schools have to take care into account, like labor charges, water bills, and stuff like that. How are these going to be paid, given that schools budget to the last dollar for every term? They do not budget for profit or for eventualities like this one that happens. So I want to know the way, the system that you put in place, that 1 million is going to go to this province or something with some such scientific side. So you have to be specific in terms of how we are going to do that. And my last question is, since you have also relaxed this measure, last week Cabinet announced that it was going to allow retailers of beer to sell. Are you also relaxing the city so that people can drink from? That I didn't say. I said last week, are you going, is there any further, my question is there any further relaxation?
It was there with the announcement.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much, John. It is very important to know that agriculture happens within a certain climate envelope. That's why, for example, the trees that you see in the Zambezi Valley and the trees that you see in the Highfield are different. And that climate is not constant, even by textbook definition. It tells you about the average weather conditions that are recorded over a period of about 30 years or so. Therefore, what we had in Zimbabwe were agroecological regions that were developed in 1960. They were developed between 1945 and 1960. For 15 years they were working on them. And an analysis of Zimbabwe's climate shows us that from about 1951 up to now, 2020 or so, we have two distinct climatic climatic cycles or climate types. Between 1951 and you see a clear break in temperature. The scientists found out that there's a clear break in temperature, whereby from about 1982 to now, the temperatures have increased at an average of 2 degrees. So the maximum temperature shows a break between 1951 and now it shows a break in about 1982, where the temperatures are a bit higher by 2 degrees. Now, when you look at the rainfall, it does the same thing. What therefore that means is that the agroecological regions, which were 5 in 1960, were representing a climate of that period, of 1951 to 1982. It means any agricultural practice that is practiced using those agroecological regions and is being practiced in 2020 can only result in hunger, which means round pegs with square holes and round pegs. So, what the scientific team did under the Zimbabwe National Geospatial and Space Agency was to recognize this and redefine the region. And in the redefinition of the region, highlight is to show that all the regions changed somehow, which means some areas that were region 2 are now region 3. Some areas that were region 3 are now region 4. The general trend is that the regions migrated towards the dry ones. But another highlight, Janet, is that region 5 is now divided into region 5A and region 5B. In terms of region 5A, this is the area around the Limpopo Valley. In this area, the rainfall is below 6 millimeters. And there is no practical rain-fed agriculture that you can do there. And then there is region 5B, which is the old region 5. So you can see that the agriculture, the shifted. You know, agroecological zones are an attempt at precision agriculture because you have to practice agriculture where it is most appropriate. So you will find out that all these changes that have taken place and our vision to become food self-sufficient and become an exporter can only happen when we do this important work that is the basis of agricultural planning. So we are looking at between 1951 and today, there are 2 climatic periods, which was 1951 to 1982 and from 1982. However, our old agroecological regions were for the climate of them, and using them for agricultural planning can only be a disaster. Except maybe of agroecological region 1, which is influenced by the mountains and is almost constant. But the rest, you can actually try and look at what our agricultural performance was doing. And most of it could be explained by a mismatch between agricultural practice and the agroecological region. While you are imagining that you are in region 2, maybe you are now in region 3, and you are surprised why your crops are not doing well. So I have taken the liberty of talking more, but that has taken place, and the scientists have captured that, and it captures very well our national vision 2030 of becoming economy and it backs up our agricultural plan, which the Honorable Minister of Agriculture enunciated, and we believe we are on the move in terms of scientific ways of farming. That our agriculture is responding to the current climate. So, Janet, in a very long way, I answered you plus extra.
No, that's very good. Thank you very much for the now the last question, I wish we had ended with that one. Blessed was to take it back to the issue about that which government is giving the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education to make sure that all the reopening of schools will go smoothly and that we will be able to protect